Pakistan stands at a historic crossroads, facing complex economic and social challenges that threaten the stability of its future. Let's start with the foundations of the economy. Pakistan's exports are heavily reliant on a narrow range of goods. In the fiscal year 2024 to 2025, the nation exported $32.1 billion worth of goods, but imported $58.38 billion, creating a daunting annual trade deficit of over $26 billion. Over 55% of all exports come from the textile sector, with key products such as knitwear, garments, and bed linen. Other significant exports include rice, accounting for about 8%, and leather goods at 4%. Surgical instruments and sports equipment contribute smaller, niche shares. This heavy reliance on low-value, labor-intensive exports means Pakistan's foreign exchange inflows are both volatile and limited. Meanwhile, its imports are packed with essential items, fuel, machinery, industrial chemicals, and consumer goods, highlighting a deep dependency on global supply chains and a persistent outflow of capital. Overlaying this already fragile picture is Pakistan's substantial defense spending. For the year 2025, the government allocated 2.55 trillion rupees, almost $9 billion to defense. That's over 20% of the entire federal budget. This allocation includes nearly $3 billion for military wages, $2.5 billion for operations, about $2.3 billion for procurement, and $1.2 billion for infrastructure. While these expenditures are justified by leaders as vital for security and sovereignty in a challenging region, the direct consequence is less budget room for health, education, research, or job creation. Such opportunity costs are felt most acutely as the population grows and cities expand. The economic picture is made even darker by the ever-increasing weight of public debt. As of 2025, Pakistan's total public debt stands at an astronomical 76 trillion rupees, equivalent to roughly $261 billion. External public debt alone is $87.4 billion, and total external debt and liabilities surpass $130 billion. More than 75% of GDP is now held as debt, far beyond internationally accepted safe limits. Pakistan is no stranger to IMF support. In 2025, a fresh $7 billion IMF loan was secured to ward off default. $2.1 billion has already been disbursed. Yet these new loans rarely fund new development. Instead, they are mainly used to repay older debts and their interest. In the current fiscal year, debt servicing will require an astounding 8.2 trillion rupees, about 47% of the entire federal budget. Interest payments alone exceed 7.3 trillion rupees, meaning more than half of every government rupee is lost before it can be spent on people or growth. To put it bluntly, Pakistan is in a debt trap. The government borrows mainly to service yesterday's debts. Each year, more borrowing is required just to keep the lights on. Without constant rollovers and new loans from the IMF and friendly countries like China and Saudi Arabia, Pakistan would run out of foreign exchange, lose the ability to pay for critical imports, and face the specter of bankruptcy and economic chaos. Amidst these deep-rooted financial pressures, a new existential threat surges forward: the rise of artificial intelligence and automation. AI-powered technologies and autonomous robots are rapidly upending the global workplace. For Pakistan, whose economic lifeblood is labor-intensive manufacturing and agriculture, this disruption could be catastrophic if not managed wisely. Estimates point to as much as 17 to 60% of Pakistan's workforce being vulnerable to AI-driven automation in the coming decade, with low and semi-skilled roles most at risk. In the vast garment and textile factories, Pakistan's top export sector, 25 to 40% of jobs, amounting to millions of positions, could disappear by 2035 as smarter machines replace repetitive manual labor. Agriculture, which employs nearly 36% of the population, faces similar threats from robotic harvesters, automated irrigation, and AI-managed logistics. If unaddressed, this technological tidal wave risks leaving millions unemployed, worsening poverty, and sowing social unrest. Meanwhile, the benefits of AI and automation, such as increased productivity and export competitiveness, will be concentrated among better capitalized businesses able to afford these new technologies and among the small number of workers with advanced digital skills. The risk is that Pakistan's digital divide will deepen, with most workers stranded and unable to participate in a rapidly evolving economy. The costs are clear. Mass job losses in critical sectors, shrinking incomes for working-class families, widening inequality and social instability, a continued lack of investment in reskilling, digital literacy, and innovative industry. The potential benefits, greater output, new market opportunities, and increased efficiency are significant but only attainable if Pakistan massively invests in education, workforce training, and infrastructure, starting now. Let's sum up the overall scenario. Pakistan's budgetary structure is being crushed by spiraling debt and relentless military expenditures, with nearly half of every rupee spent on debt servicing and more than a fifth on defense. This leaves almost nothing for growth, innovation, or supporting the millions who could lose their jobs to automation. Each year, the government is forced to borrow to survive, deepening the debt trap even further. If the status quo continues, without bold action, reforms, and long overdue investment in people and industries, Pakistan faces the prospect of systemic economic collapse and destabilization within the next decade. By 2035, if present trends persist, mass unemployment, escalating unrest, and loss of essential services could fundamentally threaten national stability. But this future is not set in stone. Pakistan still has a window to act. Prioritizing education reform and digital training for the broad workforce, diversifying beyond low-value exports, realigning budget priorities toward people and innovation instead of just debt and defense, creating industries that can survive and compete in a world dominated by AI and automation. Only by making these changes, now, not tomorrow, can Pakistan secure sustainable prosperity and stability for its citizens in an age of accelerating technological change and global competition. Pakistan now faces an unprecedented convergence of crises, mounting debt, costly defense spending, rapid technological change, escalating water tensions, devastating climate impacts, and most acutely in mid-2025, another season of catastrophic floods. Catastrophic 2025 floods, human and economic toll. The summer of 2025 has once again seen Pakistan battered by exceptional monsoon rains. Since late June, intense downpours have swept across the nation, but the impact has been especially severe in Punjab. Death toll: more than 180 people have lost their lives since the onset of the monsoon, with half the victims being children. In just one 24-hour period, 63 people died and more than 290 were injured, primarily due to collapsing homes and sudden flash floods. Infrastructure damage: hundreds of homes have been destroyed. Roads, expressways, and flights have been disrupted across Punjab and other provinces. Evacuations: authorities declared emergency zones, imposed restrictions, and carried out evacuations in low-lying and riverside areas after severe flooding of urban and agricultural land. Rising rivers, with flood levels at the Jhelum River and other water bodies reaching exceptional high levels, up to 450,000 cusecs, further rainfall threatens to worsen the situation. These floods are described as the most significant since the record disaster of 2022, once again highlighting Pakistan's extreme vulnerability to climate change and the heavy human toll exacted by increasingly erratic weather patterns. Floods ravage crops like rice, wheat, and cotton, exports vital for earning foreign exchange and supporting rural livelihoods. Many rural communities are left stranded or driven further into poverty after fields and homes are submerged. Destruction of roads, bridges, and marketplaces hampers the movement of goods, drives up food prices, and disrupts both domestic commerce and critical export flows. As emergency spending surges to meet relief and rehabilitation needs, the government's capacity to invest in other critical sectors declines further. The rising costs of repeated disasters, each large flood event erasing up to 2% of GDP, adds to fiscal deficits and debt servicing burdens. Displacement, loss of homes, and growing food insecurity have immediate and long-term consequences for millions, hampering recovery and hindering economic stability. The devastation from the 2025 floods cannot be separated from Pakistan's other structural crises. Debt trap, with debt servicing consuming nearly half the federal budget and defense another fifth, little is left for rebuilding or adaptation. Water tensions, abeyance or disputes over the Indus Waters Treaty threaten the stability of agricultural production precisely when droughts and floods strike with greater ferocity. For decades, the Indus Waters Treaty with India has been the cornerstone of Pakistan's agricultural lifeblood, but worsening diplomatic relations and threats of treaty abeyance have made Pakistan's water future uncertain. Dams and diversions upstream could sharply reduce flows, especially in the critical summer months. A 10 to 15% drop in Indus water would cripple wheat and rice harvests, bring hunger to millions, and ignite social unrest. Yet the gravest threat of all might be internal, a relentless, grinding insurgency that drains resources, saps morale, and threatens national unity. The Tehrik-i-Taliban Pakistan, or TTP, is resurgent, staging attacks on police, the military, and civilians across Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and the tribal belt. Counterinsurgency operations, requiring billions each year, bleed an already stretched security apparatus. In Balochistan and Sindh, separatist groups like the Balochistan Liberation Army and Sindhi nationalists sabotage pipelines, target infrastructure, and endanger Chinese-run investments. Each attack not only brings tragedy and fear, but also costs the economy dearly by scaring off foreign capital and forcing critical diversion of state funds. Kashmir remains a powder keg. Tensions with India over the disputed region demand ever higher military spending and perpetually risk tipping over into war, a conflict that wargamers estimate could cost tens of billions, devastate infrastructure, and shatter regional stability. Altogether, security operations against the TTP, BLA, Sindhi militants, and in Kashmir consume an estimated 20 to 25% of Pakistan's annual budget, rivaling debt repayments and vastly exceeding expenditure on public welfare. The warning signs are blaring. Pakistan's resources are being stretched to the breaking point, sapped by war, by disaster, by debt, and by economic and technological change for which it is not prepared. The path forward is stark, without a dramatic shift in priorities, focusing on peace, investment in people, resilience to climate extremes, technology education, and fiscal reform. The dangers now converging could push Pakistan into a full-scale economic, social, and humanitarian crisis within a decade.